Idea that though he is not currently a target, perhaps he still could be.
Remembering a civil rights hero, thousands gather in Memphis 50 years after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. His legacy and his impact still being felt today.
And we talk about that dream. His dream is our dream.
We got a lot to talk about this morning, but we've got to start with President Trump and the trade war he says is not a trade war. In less than 30 minutes, the opening bell will kick off the trading day, and I want you to take a look at Dow futures, down several hundred points as concerns rise over a potential trade war with China. This morning, Beijing struck back hard at the U.S. with tariffs on $50 billion worth of American goods. And where these goods come from? Trump country, 106 products on the list. Things like soybeans, cars, chemicals, and whiskey. All of this comes just hours after President Trump unveiled his own plans to target 1,300 Chinese imports. I want to bring in my great team this morning, Jason Johnson, a politics editor at TheRoot.com, Steve Schmidt, a Republican strategist, and a very special guest this morning, Democratic Governor John Hickenlooper of the state of Colorado. All right, we got to talk about this trade war that President Trump says is not a trade war. This morning, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, first of all, actually, we have the sound. I want to share this.
Even shooting wars end with negotiations. Somebody signs a treaty with someone else. It has whatever terms it has. So it wouldn't be surprising at all if the net outcome of all this is some sort of a negotiation.
Even shooting wars end in negotiations. Let's make something clear. In war, death and destruction ensue, and no one wins a war. Wilbur Ross went on to say he is surprised by market reaction. I'd like to make something clear. Wilbur Ross is lying to the American people. I know from people I speak to inside the White House. Wilbur Ross has been told by other economic advisors, by market participants, this would be the reaction. Peter Navarro 3 weeks ago said no other country would retaliate because they can't afford to. Check yourself, Mr. Navarro. They certainly can. They're called China. Steve Schmidt?
Again, we see the Commerce Secretary, one of a cauldron of incompetence in the White House, has no idea what he's doing. And so we can think about these trade issues historically, Smoot-Hawley tariff. We can see what happens when you instigate a trade war, how it can precipitate negative economic reaction, a depression. But maybe we're going to experience this now, this will be experiential learning for the American people, as Donald Trump precipitates, for no good reason, a trade war that will have devastating economic consequences in the country, not just in the equities market, but for real jobs, real people, in real towns, real cities in this country. And the consequences of an inept and incompetent president, whether it's from a national security perspective with people being killed in wars or economically, will start to come home now. And I think that's what we're starting to see here. This is very bad news for the American people, for people who are trying to get ahead, people trying to put their kids through college. You look at the attacks on Amazon, for example. If you're a retired teacher, if you're a pensioner, you're devastated by the drop in stock price caused by a political attack by the president.
This is such an important point.
It is. We have not ever seen anything like this.
We need to remember that Amazon is not solely owned by Jeff Bezos. It's a publicly traded company. So we're talking endowments, 401ks, pensions. If any private citizen went after a public company in this form, spreading disinformation, we know the president is lying about what he's saying about the post office and Amazon. The SEC would be investigating it. It blows my mind why we're not hearing that. Republicans have been working, and Democrats for years, trying to address the issues at the post office because it's about pensions. It's not about Amazon, who's paying the post office, yet we're not hearing from those government leaders, and I don't know why. Governor Hickenlooper, you're not just a politician, you're a business guy. Here's what I wonder. When I hear Wilbur Ross and the president talk about these trade deficits, do you think they understand them? When GDP rises, when the economy is strong, the trade deficit grows. We're buying stuff, we're selling stuff. Do you think they don't get that?
Well, I think they've got a twisted perspective, and for whatever reason, I think what Steve was saying about Smoot-Hawley comes back. You know, most of us when we were in high school, we heard about Smoot-Hawley. It was a funny word, right? A funny name for a law. But the bottom line is, you know, carefully constructed open trade creates wealth, right? We have excess of one thing, we trade that to somebody else, we get it back. Now you obviously have to keep improving it. To think that when you upset that whole apple cart and just say we're going to start from scratch, we're not going to have any more, you know, we're not going to worry about what we did before, we're going to just start over. Everyone's going to get, you know, pushed into corners, and as soon as we start raising tariffs, other countries are going to, they have no other choice. What else can they do except come back and raise their tariffs?
And even our own CEOs are going to stop spending. When a business leader doesn't know what the path ahead is for him or her, they put their pencil down. They stop driving. And one of the people who would agree with us on these tariffs is Larry Kudlow, the president's new economic advisor. Before he was appointed to this position, I want to share something he wrote just a few weeks ago. Tariffs are really tax hikes. Here it is. Since so many of these American consumers buy today are made of steel and aluminum, a 25% tariff on these commodities may get passed on to consumers at the cash register. This is a regressive tax on low-income families. This is the guy who's now advising the president, who says this is a regressive tax on the poor.
Every single time the president tears up a deal, says I don't care about the Paris Accords, it affects solar power and clean energy. When he says he gets rid of the Iran deal, it affects the military. When he says that he's going to, you know, build a wall or attack Mexico or something else like that, it forces, or now what we have happening with China, it forces other world leaders to say, one, I can't trust this guy, and two, for my own domestic, my own domestic success, I'm going to dig in. I'm going to be tough with this guy because that's how I don't end up looking like a fool to my own people. So the president's behavior is not only economically disruptive, but it leads to long-term consequences as far as any other country we have to negotiate with. And that's what the problem is. Yes, it's going to end up hurting people in their pocketbooks. Yes, it's going to end up hurting business. But long-term, no one will trust us. No one wants to go into a deal with a guy who changes the deal every 10 minutes or will explain it on Twitter and then say something different to you on the phone.
The president or the president's enthusiasts make the argument he's dumb like a fox. Behind closed doors, he is negotiating in ways that you wouldn't understand. Yet people I talk to in the White House say there's no negotiating happening behind the scenes. What do you think is really going on here?
Well, I think the real challenge, I mean, as close as we can tell, at least what information is available, is it's pretty much shooting from the hip. In other words, he's got a basic plan, he makes a proposal, and then they walk away. And that's not the way you get to a deal. And in business, certainly Donald Trump was successful by being a bully and pushing people into corners. If things didn't work out, he'd sue them. That's not how trade works. Trade is based on predictability. People want incremental changes. They want to have some expectation that what comes out of this is going to be better for both sides, which is, you know, that's what you're trying to get to. And somehow people now are throwing up their heads saying, we're so nervous about what he might do next that we're just going to raise our tariffs and make sure we're safe.
Right.
I just think it's patently obvious when you watch the news conference yesterday and you watch the president talking about the trilateral relationship with the Baltic republics. He has no idea what he's talking about. It's the musings of an imbecile, really. No idea what he's talking about at any level. So we talk about trade. We talk about and consider his blowing up NAFTA. $1 trillion of trade flows across the North American border between the United States and Canada.
And it's
the most successful trade relationship in the history of the world. 35 of our 50 states, their #1 trading partner is Canada. For the balance of the states, save for 2, it's the #2 trading relationship. Integrated supply chains. You want to talk about crashing the market, abrogate the NAFTA agreement, disrupt $1 trillion of trade that flows freely across the largest, longest, undefended, peaceful border in the history of the world, and let's see what happens. This is an incompetent president, has no idea what he's doing, no idea what he's talking about, and the consequences of incompetent actions will be paid for by the American people, and we're starting to see that now. We're starting to see this with the market reaction. We're starting to see this in the bilateral China relationship, and so there are consequences for this type of action and behavior, and the American people are soon going to start paying the bill.
We need to remind our audience of 2 things. A, Steve Schmidt is a Republican, and B, the United States walked away from TPP. And President Trump said, we are going to negotiate something stronger and better. We have not done that. Do you know who stayed in TPP? Canada. And the beat goes on for Canada as they continue to trade away with trading partners, and we are the cheese standing alone. I now need to turn to reports on Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. According to the Washington Post, Special Counsel told President Trump's lawyers that while he is still under investigation, he's not currently a criminal target. The president's attorney, Ty Cobb, declined to comment, while his lawyer, Jay Sekulow, said, quote, "We do not discuss real or alleged conversations between our legal team and the Office of Special Counsel." I want to bring in the man who wrote this extraordinary piece for the Washington Post. He is also moderator of Washington Week on PBS. Roberto, this is some piece. I want to share this quote. In private negotiations in early March about a possible presidential interview, Mueller described Trump as a subject of his investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016. He's not a target, but he's a subject of the investigation. Walk me through the difference, because this morning when I woke up, I actually turned on Fox and Friends, and I saw that headline. He's not the target, like a huge win. But I think that might not be the case.
It is a complicated legal situation. Working with my colleague Carol Lenig at the Washington Post, we've reported that the Mueller probe is trying to get an interview with the President of the United States. And in the discussions to try to make that sit-down happen, they've been updating the President's lawyers about his status. And they have told the President's lawyers that he is not a witness. He is now considered a subject, not a criminal target, but somewhere in the middle, someone who's a subject. And what it means, in brief, is someone whose intent is not necessarily known. They want to find out more about his intent on certain decisions, but as of yet, at this moment, is not about to be indicted.
If you're in the middle, though, it could go either way. Governor, we also learned in this piece that Robert Mueller is preparing a report on a possible obstruction of justice. What do you make of that?
Well, obviously, if that turns out to be true and comes forward, that's very, very serious. I mean, that's probably one of the allegations that could really stick. Certainly the frenzy of speculation, in a funny way, serves the president, right? He's kind of been a master at confusing, hiding the cheese and moving things around. And in a funny way, my mother used to say to us when we were kids, methinks he doth complain too much, right? And this is something that actually may serve him.
Wow. Steve Schmidt, what's your take on this Washington Post piece?
I was just thinking, I was like a subject and a target. It's kind of like, to me, the difference between being like engaged and married, like one before the other, and inexorably linked.
Neither ends well.
And well, no, Stephanie, not necessarily. No, but look, the large issue here is the Russian Federation and Vladimir Putin across all of the West are attacking democracies and attacking the idea of democracy. So we talk about this country as a place, and we talk about America as a place where people live and things happen, but we don't talk as much as we should and as much as we used to about America as an idea. And the Russian attack is on the idea of liberty, of freedom. He's undermining the notion of the capacity of the American people for self-governance. He's attacking our institutions, and the lubricants of the democratic system are faith, trust, and belief. And Vladimir Putin is attacking that. And this president, and there's a Russian term, useful idiot, for an unwilling or a willing collaborator to their aims. And our president is a useful idiot, referred to, by the way, on Russian state media all the time as our president, meaning Russia's president. He is a useful idiot for Russia's aims at undermining our democratic institutions. When he attacks the intelligence community, when he attacks the Justice Department, when he attacks and undermines essential institutions, he is doing Vladimir Putin's bidding, his work for him. He's undermining the American people's faith in the idea of America, the capacity of the American people for self-governance, and the essential institutions that make our country special. And so it's an extraordinary moment to watch this unfolding every day.
Governor?
When he attacks the free media, when he attacks the judiciary,
Of course,
those are all the pillars of a free democracy, and Russia is aligning those similar attacks. I think Steve's exactly right. This is ultimately, again, it hasn't. What it's doing is weakening the fiber, the fabric that holds us together. It hasn't broken it, but it is weakening.
All right, well, there's somebody who definitely, you can make the argument, has felt undermined at some point this year, H.R. McMaster. And I want to share something he said, if you haven't seen it yet, in his last speech as National Security Advisor. Take a look.
Russia brazenly and implausibly denies its actions, and we have failed to impose sufficient costs.
Well, wow, with that, I mean,
but
this on the same day, remember President Trump yesterday, no one's been tougher on Russia than me, and everyone's nodding their head because they know it's true.
Everybody knows at this point. The Russians know this. Everyone who's halfway intelligent in national security knows this. Even Republicans who won't speak out loud know this. You know, the president has done nothing against Russia. The president has not used the resources that have been allocated to combat what Russia is doing. The president has stymied any attempts to protect our electoral system this fall about Russia. He has done absolutely nothing. But I will say this, and I think this is key, you know, going with what we talked about with what Mueller's actually doing and being a target versus, you know, being a subject one way or another. This is like every episode of Law and Order. This is every cop show you've ever seen.
That is my favorite show.
Exactly. Mine too. Mine too. It's like, come on,
SVU or the original?
I like the original.
Really?
Yeah,
I'm an SVU.
SVU.
Anyway, yeah,
Jerry Orbach was
Gotta
like,
go with Ice-T.
Yeah, for sure.
Jerry Orbach was my spirit animal. I love that show. But yeah, like, you know, this is every cop show. It's like, yeah, just come in and talk. Come in and talk. If you tell President Trump that he is a target right now, he's not going to talk to you. So you basically have to keep dragging this out and suggesting that maybe we're just trying to find out about those other guys. Come in and chat with us. That's what Mueller's doing right now.
Okay, Robert Costa, then take me to Washington. On a day when the president says nobody's been tougher on Russia than me, when H.R. McMaster says we have utterly failed, what are the rest of Republicans saying? We know they're not saying anything publicly. What are they saying behind closed doors, whether it's about the president and Russia or your piece about Robert Mueller and the president?
On the Russia matter, with regard to foreign policy, the Republicans and Democrats I've spoken to in recent weeks are alarmed to some respects about what they see as an enthusiasm gap in this administration between its public comments about President Putin and the policies the administration has taken. They know the president and the administration have decided to expel certain diplomats as they have this standoff with Russia over interference in the election and different activities Russia has done over the last couple of years. At the same time, they don't see the president echoing General McMaster in the same way, and they wonder why. And they also see the president having some kind of conversation with President Putin about a possible visit to Washington, even the White House. And this sends up a red flag in the traditional foreign policy community. But of course, in the White House, they say the president just doesn't believe or share the same values or the same perspective as that traditional foreign policy community in both parties.
All right, then. Governor, before we go, you had said just a moment ago that the system's not broken, but it's definitely being tested, whether the president is doubting our judiciary or the free press. It almost seems like you're making a call for a stronger, you know, sort of centrist leadership. Does that mean you're running for president?
No. What I'm saying, I'm being very clear, is that when you fray and weaken the fabric that holds things together, I mean, what it does is, and Steve said this, it makes people stop believing in government.
Okay, be a different kind of clear for me, because Governor Kasich of Ohio was sort of hinting that 2020 might be a time for President Trump to get a challenger. Could you and John Kasich be the ticket? I've told you this before. It would make a really long bumper sticker,
exactly.
So it only works for SUVs. But is that in your future?
No, I don't think so. Although John Kasich is, I mean, his points of contention with the president are always intriguing. So I think he's worth paying attention to. That being said, as much as I respect him and enjoy his company, I think we disagree on too many things to really be a part, you know, a unity ticket.
I've seen Dumb and Dumber, so you're saying there's a chance? So you're saying there's a chance? That's what I heard. That's what I heard right there.
This is one of the most effective leaders of government in the United States. Extremely successful governor, extremely successful mayor of Denver. Businessman, smart, pragmatic, competent, effective. virtues that are missing, you know, from a lot of our politics today. So I hope you'll run
Sounds like you
for
just got a
president.
vote here. I mean, it just sounded- all right, we're going to leave it there. So you're saying there's a chance. Okie doke.